Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our NUIT Tech Talk on our top 5 tools for securing your devices. I'm Christina Bello with the Northwestern IT communications team and have with me today's presenter, Mary Carp. Before we begin the presentation today, if you're having any trouble hearing me or Mary, please make sure your volume's adjusted accordingly. If you're using headphones or speakers, your volume's turned all the way up. Also, make sure that you're using a wired connection if that's available, and that you've closed any applications running in the background that are connected to the internet. If you have email open, any other web browsers, we just advise closing them for the best connection during the presentation today. If you have a question at any time, you can type it into the Q&A box down here, and we'll answer those questions throughout the presentation. We'll also give you an opportunity to download the PowerPoint that Mary's going to go through at the end of the presentation, along with a handy little checklist of some tools and choices you can make for security, some best practices for you. But before we get started, we have 2 quick poll questions just to get a sense of your role at the university. So our first question is, what is your role at Northwestern? So I'll give everyone a moment to answer this question, staff, faculty, researcher, student, or other. And again, I'll just give everybody a moment to answer that question. Oops. At first glance, we have a lot of staff members in the audience today, so that's great to know. Okay, give people one more moment. All right, and our second question, to follow up on that, is who manages security and settings for your office computer devices? And there's a couple options here. If you manage your own devices, if you're managed by a local technical support team, if you manage some and your IT support team does others, or if you actually are the IT support for your area and manage other people's devices, that's an option as well. Or if you're not sure, you can select that option as well. So we just want to kind of get a sense of, to some degree, what our technical expertise is in the audience and what we're going to focus on today. All right, so I'll give everyone one more moment to answer that question. Great. Looks like several people are managed by local technical support. Some people do a mix of managing their own, and some people are the ones doing the managing. All right. Well, with that said, I will hand it over to Mary.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk to you today about some of the best tools that you can install on your devices to ensure that they and your data remain secure. And I'll be talking about these broadly as categories of utilities, but I'll try to provide some specific examples of each type of tool so that you have a place to start if you're interested. A lot of these things that I'm talking about are useful on work machines, on personal machines, desktops, laptops, tablets, smartphones, all of it. So this should be pretty broadly relevant to everyone. And if you're a fairly tech-savvy person, you can install or configure all the tools on your own. But if not, you can talk to your local IT about how to get assistance with it. And that's especially important for university-owned devices. Your local IT support staff are responsible for configuring your devices. So if you're intending to install any additional security software, you should definitely be talking to them. And if you're part of a local IT unit, which it looks like a couple of you are, I hope this presentation encourages you to look at whether you're implementing some of these tools on a broad scale already and to think about how you might administer and roll out some of them to improve the security posture for your business units.
And I'll mention too, real briefly, if you either don't know if you have local IT support or if your area isn't supported locally, you can always contact the support center. We can help either figure out who does do support for your area or help you get set up with some of these tools as well.
Right. So the first tool that I want to talk about is anti-malware. Forgive me for starting with the obvious. I promise to get more exciting than this, but this is really a foundational part of a secure system, and that's especially true for desktops and laptops, which tend to be the primary targets for malware. So what is malware? You've probably heard all kinds of names for code that does bad things to your computer: viruses, trojans, worms, adware, spyware, that sort of thing. And many programs market themselves as specifically handling one or the other of these. I still have friends asking me if they need to install Spybot Search and Destroy, which I think is circa like 2002. But the thing is that this breakdown of malicious software, aka malware, into these various niche arenas, this kind sends your personal information to advertisers, this one injects advertisements into web pages, this one just messes up things on your computer. It's all sort of an unimportant distinction for the average user, because most of the major quote-unquote antivirus programs do try to catch most or all of this malicious software. So the most important distinction for us as users of systems is how we end up downloading some form of malicious software and how we can avoid doing that. Malware infection can happen in a lot of different ways. You receive an email message with an attachment. Maybe the attachment itself runs a script if you click on it. Maybe it asks you to open up a Word document that runs something called a macro, which is legitimate functionality of Microsoft Word, but can be hijacked by malicious code to do naughty things on your machine. I included an example of what that might look like if you've ever received a document that looks anything like this. Most email systems have some form of gateway that checks incoming messages for malicious content and quarantines them, and Northwestern's email system is no exception, but nothing is 100% perfect, and things do still get through. So you should still exercise caution when opening things in your mailbox.
And I've noticed that protected view enable editing on files even that I download either from like a file sharing site. So it is a helpful kind of heads up. Just watch what you're accessing.
Yeah. Yeah, and make sure that you are checking the email for other signs of compromise. Make sure you recognize the sender, that there's enough in the body of the message to suggest that they intended to send this to you, even if it seems to be coming from a friend. If it just says, check this out, and there's a PDF attached, you might want to check in with them through text message or something like that. That looks suspicious. You can also download something intentionally that appears to be legitimate. Maybe you're on a website and it says, click here to download such and such an image, and you trust it, so you do. Maybe you're trying to torrent something. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say you're looking for something you're legally allowed to share and distribute, and something's labeled exactly as you'd expect it to be if it were legitimate. But this doesn't mean that it isn't malware. How legitimate is the site? Do you know who this person is that's sharing it with you?
We had a great question. Mary actually just come in. Someone said they used a trial version of Malwarebytes and now keep getting pop-ups to upgrade often. Would that be considered malware? How, is that a virus itself? How can you tell the difference?
No, so that one would be legitimate. You knew when you downloaded it that you were getting a legitimate piece of software from Malwarebytes, and now it just wants you to purchase their professional version. But there are some pieces of malware that do pretend like they're antivirus. If you get something that you don't recognize, that you know you didn't go download at all, that's a very common sign of an infection. And it's trying to get you to click and to download this or that to get rid of this fake malware that it says it's found on your device.
So how can you tell the difference, basically?
It comes down to whether you recognize this as something that you've installed on your machine or not.
Got it. So in this instance, they installed trial version of Malwarebytes, and it's asking, pop-up ads. It's obnoxious, but it is legitimate. Just because it's a trial, we did download it deliberately. So best practice in that case, if you want to either buy the professional version or find one that's free and doesn't have the ad pop-ups. So yeah, I can see how that would be annoying if you get something to stop.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So another attack vector is accidentally transferring malicious code by plugging in devices containing that code, like DVDs, flash drives. Maybe you found a flash drive lying around and some bad guy left it there on purpose to infect machines. Maybe you had a virus on another machine, this is pretty common, and you transferred some data from that machine to your new one, and now your new machine's infected as well. And then you can even accidentally download malware simply by being on a web page. Many browsers are configured to automatically run certain types of content on the page for your convenience, things like videos or advertisements that move along the side of the page, and then things you don't necessarily want to have to personally okay every time that you load a web page. But if someone hosts a malicious page or injects malicious content into someone else's legitimate page, which can happen, your browser sometimes won't recognize that as malicious, and it just ends up running that content like anything else. And so that's part of why it's so important to be careful about where you surf on the web. And again, this is more common on laptops and desktops, but this type of thing does exist on mobile devices as well. And there are apps in the Google Play and Apple App Store that can run malicious code. You can accidentally click on one of those advertisements that pops up suddenly, and you end up, opening a browser on your phone and going to some web page. And even though everyone says Apple products don't get viruses, that's not true. We see it happen at the university quite frequently. So anti-malware is a good idea on those devices as well. Great. So the basic message is that it's important for you to always be cognizant of what you're doing. Do I really want to click on this? Do I know where it's from? Do I trust it? But in case you slip up, you do want an anti-malware application on your device to help you out and provide backup in case of failures, which we call defense in depth in the security industry.
So if they do access something that, you get to a web page, you thought you trusted it, and all of a sudden it starts looking shady, or something starts popping up that looks questionable, who should they contact if they think they've done something, or something starts to look funny?
Local IT, if it's a university machine, whoever you go to for, maybe it's a Geek Squad, or maybe you've got a cousin who's really good with computers.
Okay.
If you're not comfortable dealing with it yourself, but you can run your own malware scans and see what it's picked up.
Any favorites? Any particular software you suggest?
Yes, and that is the next slide, in fact. So you've got several options. Northwestern provides Semantic for both university and personally owned machines at no cost. This can be downloaded directly from the university website. I put a link there at the bottom of the page. So if you want to download the PowerPoint and click on that later, you can do that. There are also free and paid versions of software such as Malwarebytes and Avast, AVG. If you prefer to use one of those types of software, though, be careful about where you're downloading from, especially if it's free. SourceForge is a good place for downloading software. A lot of sites will link to that. Original sites like malwarebytes.org are good as well. There are places like, you might have seen Softonic or CNET, and those are less trustworthy. There are some key signs you can look for to determine if the page that you're on is a good place to download content. The URL should be pretty straightforward. If it's free-software-4u.com, it's not a good sign. If there are a lot of ads flying around on the edges of pages, big download buttons like the picture here all over the place that upon closer inspection you're not sure if they're actually download buttons for your utility or just ads trying to get you to click on something else, that's not a good sign either. On the mobile device front, Avast makes an app that provides mobile security. There's also a program called Lookout that comes, I think a paid version on a lot of phones through the original provider. So when if you're going to go download a different app, just make sure when you're selecting it that you look at the rating, you look at the number of users who have downloaded it, look at the permissions that it asks for, and whether there are pop-ups included in the app, that kind of thing.
I think they just started, Google's just started including in the Play Store which apps have ads in them as well. I think I just saw that recently. So that's something worth noting too.
Yeah, it's good to know. And I also want to add one more tool that I would consider to be really part of anti-malware, but that is nice in other ways as well, and that's an ad blocker. I mentioned the idea of these drive-by attacks where you accidentally run malicious content just by accessing a web page. A lot of these pieces of content show up in the form of advertisements, and they can occasionally show up on an otherwise perfectly legitimate site that you visit all the time. Maybe they just didn't catch it this time. CNN, ESPN, one of those sites. And even if the content isn't run automatically, many of the advertisements are popping up suddenly in front of things that you're about to click on, that it knows you're going to want to click on. Or they're pretending to be valid parts of the page in order to get you to click on them. So a good way to handle this situation is, first of all, you can disable Adobe Flash Player and Java in the browser that you use to surf the web, or force them to prompt you before running, and then just have another browser set up for specifically when you're intending to watch multimedia so that you know the pages that you're going to. But you can also install utilities like this AdBlock Plus plugin, which is available for most browsers to block some of these types of advertisements and make your browsing experience that much safer. AdBlock also makes its own browser that has built-in ad blocking capabilities, and it can be used on mobile, desktop, etc. I actually use it on my own mobile phone. And I'm personally a big fan of ad blocking, but I do want to add that I'm also a big fan of supporting people who are providing software and content that you enjoy. And sometimes ads are how these people generate revenue. So make sure that if you are using ad blocking, you add sites that are generally safe to the exception list. Ads are annoying, but they keep people afloat. And the idea behind the ad blocker here is to stop the nefarious stuff, not to get content for free that's supposed to be ad supported. So that's my extra anti-malware tool plus PSA. Let Wired Magazine serve you ads. Donate $1 or $5 to Wikipedia, your other massively useful free tool when they ask you for it. Backup utilities. Everyone knows that backups are a good idea. It's good to have old versions of things in case you accidentally make a change or deletion that you shouldn't have. It's good to have even quasi-up-to-date files in case the device breaks or becomes corrupted and you lose your latest changes. I'm sure everyone's heard about the ransomware that's been making the rounds lately. It's a piece of malware that encrypts files so that you can't access them and then asks you to send payment in exchange for the decryption key. This is far less of a problem if you have copies of those files saved in some other location not connected to your compromised device. So
actually, sorry, Mary, we had one question going back to the anti-malware, antivirus software. Can people install antivirus on their work machines? Do they need someone to do that for them? How can they get that installed?
You can install it yourself on university-owned machines as long as you're doing it with Symantec. If you wanted to install something other than Symantec, I would talk to your local IT team. But either way, I'm sure if you're more comfortable with having somebody else do it, you can contact local IT and they'll come and install that for you. Great. All right. So there are many utilities out there for making backups. University data can be backed up to CrashPlan, and cloud storage is also available through Box and SharePoint. Those are more file storage and file sharing utilities than backup utilities, but they can be used to store copies of important files if you choose. Just be sure that you're following guidelines on what can go where. There's a handy chart on Northwestern IT page that can help you determine what types of data can be stored in various places. And as with everything else, if you're looking for backups for your university-owned machine, talk to local IT about it. Maybe that the device has already been backed up and you didn't know it.
Yeah, this is definitely a good one to talk to your local IT support because, as Mary said, some people may already be running some backup stuff without it popping up regularly for you, but they may be aware of it. Just something worth kind of looking into, seeing what your area is doing.
And personal data can be backed up using native backup tools like Time Machine on Macs or Windows Backup and Recovery. There are plenty of tools out there for purchase. You can back up to the cloud using Google Drive, iCloud, Dropbox, etc. That's what people generally use for mobile devices. The setup is really integrated and easy. You can also back up to an external hard drive just locally, which will often include its own backup software as part of the purchase. So there are different theories about how often to keep backups, where to store them, how long to keep them around, how many duplicates you should have, and all that. I know people who keep an external hard drive at home that they back up to once a month and put in a fireproof safe. I know people who use cloud services. I know people who back up only one folder and say heck with it for the rest. So the big things to consider when deciding on your personal backup strategy would be these that are listed here, which files or folders to back up. Storage space is cheap, but if you have limited space, you should be backing up the things that would really be a problem to lose. Vacation photos, important. Digital copies of movies that you have the original DVD for and can re-download from iTunes anyway, probably not as important. And that takes up a lot of space. Multimedia takes up a lot of space. And your backup of your backup is your whole life in these files, things like that. How often to perform backups? How much data loss can you tolerate? Do you need every version of this document that's ever existed? Or would it be enough to just have the month's worth of information? Do you import photos to your device every week? That kind of thing. Where to do the backups? Some files are important enough that they shouldn't be kept in the same place as your computer because if something happens, a fire or something like that, you need those files to survive. In that case, backing up to the cloud might be an option, or storing an external hard drive in a safe, or keeping it at your sister's house, whatever works. Sometimes files are so important, though, that they shouldn't be in the cloud. You probably don't want PDFs from your bank with your account number to be stored out there. Or if you are storing it out there, you would want to encrypt it first, which we'll talk about shortly. How long to retain backups? Believe it or not, sometimes it's better to delete data when it's outlived its usefulness. I know it's cheap and easy to store things for long periods, and sometimes we just do it automatically rather than have to worry about it, but just in case we ever need it in the future. But this can actually expose us to more risk because we have sensitive data out there that has some non-zero chance of being compromised. So if you have an old document with social security numbers or other sensitive information and you don't need it anymore, just get rid of it. Even institutions like the IRS and healthcare centers have retention limits. And if the government doesn't care about this record anymore, do you?
Yeah.
So. And for any IT folks out there, if you aren't already part of a backup solution, particularly the university's crash plan solution, this is another opportunity to get in contact with the IT support center and find out more about that. If you are backing up in some centralized fashion, a good tip on managing your centralized storage space is to make sure that your end users are only backing up the files that need to be backed up. I know there are a lot of university machines that contain, a bunch of personal music that people are listening to while they work, and maybe that doesn't need to be backed up. It could save you some space. And also, as much as you can market the use of SharePoint and Box, do it. There's a lot of university data out there that should not be stored on external solutions like Dropbox. And the more people spreading the word about free university-sanctioned secure storage solutions, the better. Moving on to tool number 3, I believe, encryption. Encryption is definitely one of the more difficult and caveat-happy protections to try to understand, but it's a truly useful tool. So bear with me if we get into the weeds a little bit in this section. And please feel free to interrupt with questions if I'm not being clear about something. So in its natural state, your data is just sitting in plain readable format on your devices, or is being sent in plain readable format across the internet when you send emails or enter information on a web page. And even data that's stored on a machine that you have to log into isn't necessarily secure. People can remove the storage device and connect it to another machine or to access the data as if it were a flash drive without having to log into it. So encryption is a method of protecting that data by encoding it such that it's illegible unless someone has the key necessary to decipher it. That key can be a password, a PIN, a file that sits on the device, a flash drive. The most important part is that the key is a secret that belongs only to the authorized user. There are different types of encryption available. You can encrypt the entire storage drive, known as full disk encryption, which makes the entire disk inaccessible to someone who might gain visible access to it. It's a common choice for things like laptops and mobile devices since they're easily lost or stolen, and it's a great way to ensure that sensitive data you may have had on these devices will remain inaccessible. You can use tools like Microsoft's BitLocker for Windows, FileVault 2 for Mac. These will encrypt your whole disk, and you can even use those to encrypt flash drives and other external disks. We like these particular solutions at Northwestern IT because they are native to your operating system, so it's less likely that your device is going to update itself and the encryption will somehow break or become corrupted. And then there's a setting on both Android and iOS devices that lets you turn on encryption for tablets and phones as well, and that's just a built-in setting. It's not an extra app that you need to download. So I'm going to take a bit of a technical detour here in an attempt to explain this idea more fully. An important thing to understand about encryption tools of all kinds, full disk and otherwise, is that they don't necessarily stop someone from stealing your data. Someone can copy an someone can copy an encrypted file onto a flash drive. They can intercept encrypted network traffic. They can steal an encrypted disk. They can do anything they normally do to get hold of the files, but what encryption does is stop people who've stolen that data from actually being able to read and access those files. So the advantage, obviously, is that you don't have to think about all the possible ways that a person could get a hold of your data and try to protect against all of them. You just encrypt the data and then know that it's safe as long as you haven't provided someone with your secret key. But that last part is the important part, because providing someone with your secret key doesn't necessarily mean actively telling somebody a password. The downside of something like full disk encryption is that your login credentials are generally what's being used to decrypt the device. It's encrypted while it's off, and then once you log into your account, the files are decrypted so that they're temporarily accessible to you. So what this means is that if you have a piece of malware on your machine, or someone sits down at your computer and you've left it logged in, there's nothing to stop them from accessing your data. Your files have been temporarily decrypted until you've logged out or locked the screen, such that it requires a login again. So this is why in some circumstances you might opt instead, or in addition, to encrypt individual files or folders, which is what file level encryption is. Instead of encrypting the entire drive, you're encrypting specific subsets of data, which will prompt you for a password when you intend to access, this specific folder. You click on it, it prompts you for your password, and you enter it, and then you can get into the files. So that's great for computers that you know are in secure or non-mobile locations, but that are shared with other people. Maybe you'd like to prevent someone with administrative access to the machine from being able to access your files. It's also useful, though, for non-shared computers that you just keep sensitive data on. So we were just talking about the possibility of malware compromise, which no one is immune to. So if your sensitive files still require a password to specifically access, then you merely being logged into the machine is not sufficient for someone to compromise those files.
And this is definitely a topic, talk to your local.
Yes, yeah. And there will be a whole warning page on that, I promise.
Yep. And this is, and again, this is something that might be in place in your area, depending on what kind of information you use. If there's a lot of personally identifiable information, health information is a big topic, certain research. Again, this is really going to depend on what kind of information you have, what your local IT support is working with you on. But this is definitely something, depending on the type of information, is definitely important to talk to your local tech support about.
Yeah. And the last type of encryption that I wanted to talk about was just encrypting traffic as it moves over the network. There are a number of ways to do this, but most of them are not in your control in the way that full disk and file level encryption are. This is because you're not the only person that needs to know the secret key in these situations. People on both ends of the communication would need to. Sometimes they don't know each other, and they don't need to know each other. You're logging into your bank account. You shouldn't have to call your bank, negotiate a secret password over the phone, and then implement the encryption on your own. So this is a problem that was solved for all of us by some very smart math nerds, and the solution has been included in the basic functionality of our computers and our browsers, so we don't even have to think about it. The keys are negotiated between the machines. All we have to worry about as users is making sure that we understand when it's occurring and when it isn't, so that we only send secure data through secure methods. Most of the time, we're communicating through our browsers. Websites that anticipate you will be sending sensitive data, like your bank's email, login pages, even for unimportant sites, should automatically be redirecting you to a secure page with an encrypted connection. So you may have noticed when you type in gmail.com, you're redirected to this URL, https:// which there's a picture of it there on the slide. HTTPS is an encrypted protocol. So when you're on a web page and want to know whether your communications are secure, you can just glance up at the browser heading and see whether it says HTTPS. Many browsers will help encourage this by including little insignias that indicate it's secure, like that little green lock. Another method of encrypting network traffic, another method of encrypting network traffic is by using private networks that have been specifically configured for secure use. So many of you probably already use Northwestern's VPN to access certain university resources. The VPN is also a secure way to conduct any other university business, like sending emails, anything like that. And we encourage people to use it in situations where they would otherwise be sending it over a secure network, like open wireless points at airports, hotels, coffee shops, that sort of thing.
So actually that leads into a question someone just asked, which is, do they need to use VPN on a phone if they're accessing university email?
You do not. Generally, you can use VPN on a phone, but generally you won't need to. The thing about mobile networks is that they are much harder for people to spoof than just a basic wireless network.
When you say a mobile network versus a wireless network, so
when you're on 4G or 3G instead of actually signed into Wi-Fi. So if you're on Wi-Fi at Northwestern, you are connected to Northwestern's secure network. If you are connecting on your phone to an open wireless access point at the airport, that's a situation where you don't want it to be syncing your email over that without using VPN or something like that.
So basically, I'm sitting at the airport. I have T-Mobile, so my options are either connect to my normal T-Mobile network that would use my data, or whatever airport Wi-Fi. So best practice there, use T-Mobile or whatever your carrier is.
Yeah, or connect to VPN.
Got it.
Yeah.
And same thing's true for like hotels and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah, any network that you might be on with strangers, take advantage of the VPN.
Great. And actually, I'll add a point to that too about the university email. There are some security practices if you have university email on your phone. If you have it set up, I think you're required to set up a lock, I think a PIN to access on your phone. So that is just an additional level of protection, not related to the network, but just security in general for university email.
Yeah. So a nice feature of many of these encryption tools, specifically PGP, I think is the one that most commonly includes this as part of their utility suite, is that they also include what's known as file shredding capabilities, which is a way for you to securely delete sensitive data instead of just tossing it in the recycling bin and then emptying the trash. Deleting data is not a secure removal method. All it basically does is tell the system it no longer needs to know how to access that data, that space it was taking up can be used for something else. It's not important anymore. File shredding, or secure deletion, actually overwrites that data when you delete it with garbled nonsense, so that your data is no longer accessible even for bad guys that are good with computer forensics. So file shredding software is included with your tool. There are other utilities you can use. Mac has this built-in secure deletion tool. There's something called Eraser, things like that. Great. So we are out of the weeds now. Thanks for sticking with me. But before we move on to the next tool, there's a really, really important thing I want to note here. It's so important that it gets its own slide, even though the previous slide wasn't full, and I'm really fussy about things like that. And that's that you should be very careful about implementing encryption. It's a great tool because it does the job you want it to do. It does it really well, which is to prevent unauthorized users who have physical access to a device from accessing your data. But it's also a dangerous tool because it does that job really well. If the machine thinks that you are not an authorized user, either because you forgot your password, you lost your key file, there's some sort of software corruption, then you won't be able to access your data either. So it's really important to create these recovery keys when prompted during the encryption process, to store them somewhere safe that isn't on the encrypted device, to make sure that any data you're encrypting is also backed up somewhere else in unencrypted form. And you should not encrypt a university-owned device without talking to your local IT units, who should be able to take care of that process for you. If you're looking at encrypting personal devices, I'd recommend talking to whoever you normally rely on for technical advice and see if they can assist you. It's fairly seamless once it's set up correctly, but you do want to make sure that it's set up correctly in the first place with recovery keys saved somewhere just in case the device doesn't want to let you in.
Yeah, even in kind of an inconsequential example, I have a friend who had set up encryption on their smartphone just because they thought, well, it's a secure thing, I should probably do this. And then phone died, took all the files, went to put it on a new phone, and it was still encrypted, so lost everything that was on phone because there was no way to get it back. So, yeah.
Yes. And we definitely encourage any local IT units who are not doing encryption right now with their business units to consider doing so, especially with laptops that can accidentally disappear. It happens sometimes. And even with desktop computers that are out in public spaces where they may be vulnerable to theft. It's not always easy to know what kind of data somebody's dealing with on a machine, and with native encryption software like BitLocker and FileVault being free, it's sometimes worth just treating everyone like they're potentially using, they potentially are storing sensitive data. But be sure that you're handling recovery keys responsibly, managing that process in a reliable way, and we definitely welcome you to contact the IT Support Center if you're interested in participating in some of our centralized encryption rollout, recovery key escrow, encryption reporting utilities that we use in central IT. Great. We might have a dedicated tech talk on this in the future. All right, next tool. Multi-factor authentication. Authentication is just validating your identity, and it can be done in 3 ways usually. It's something you have, like a physical key, a device, something that's known to belong to you, something that you are, your biometrics, fingerprints, retina scans, DNA, that sort of thing, and something you know, which is a PIN, a password, a fact about you, that kind of thing. And the idea behind basic authentication through just one of these 3 is good because it requires that someone provide proof of their identity instead of just a claim, but the problem is that it's often fairly trivial for someone else to acquire this proof and to use it to gain access. The idea behind multi-factor authentication is that it is not as trivial for someone to acquire multiple different kinds of proof of identity. And this is not just multiple pieces of proof, like a few facts that you know or a few things that you have, but multiple pieces of proof from multiple of these categories. So now someone doesn't just need to steal your password to log in, they also have to be able to plug in your USB device with a special file on it. Or they don't just need your MyLock key to open the door, they need your MyLock key and then your 6-digit PIN and then your fingerprint. So many of you are already familiar with multi-factor authentication because the university uses it for the HR system. If you want to access certain things like direct deposit, you have to configure multi-factor authentication. We use something called Duo, which allows you to either have a phone number of your choice dialed when you attempt to log in, or which sends a notification to your smartphone using a free app that you can download and allows you to confirm your login that way. Duo is going to become more and more common for use of university resources as time goes on because it greatly increases the difficulty of achieving unauthorized access to those resources for attackers who steal or guess or socially engineer people's credentials. They would also have to fly over to Chicago and steal your phone. So works for us.
Yeah, not many people are going to make that much effort.
Exactly. So you've probably seen Duo in some form or other at Northwestern, but what you may not know is that a lot of services that you use personally also offer some form of multi-factor authentication. Email providers like Gmail and Yahoo allow you to set up this functionality. Apple and Microsoft do for their respective accounts. There are other sites that contain personal information like Facebook or Amazon. And in fact, if you like the Duo smartphone app and are already using it for Northwestern resources, many of these allow you to use Duo as your multi-factor authentication app as well. So you can have all of your push notifications running under a single app on your phone.
So this is basically the example, like when I go to log into my bank on a different computer and it says we have to send you a text message to make sure, and then I get the code on my phone and then have to enter that. So that's an example basically of multi-factor authentication.
Exactly. And a lot of banking sites don't even make this optional. They really require it anytime they don't recognize the device that you're logging in from.
Yep.
So we very much encourage people to use multi-factor authentication wherever it's available because it makes things exponentially harder for attackers to fake pretending to be you. It's an extra step at login, but really barely. It pushes a notification or calls your phone, you say okay, and you're in. And with the number of compromised credentials that we see on campus for all kinds of things, it's very much worth it, especially for services that contain personal information like your email. It's definitely a direction that many, many services are already moving in and will continue to move in the future because it's become increasingly difficult to create uncrackable passwords that people can actually remember. And attackers are getting a lot better at social engineering and other forms of credential compromise. So get aboard the ship. This is a security tool that's going to become more common from here. Which is coming. And that brings us lastly to password managers. Anyone who has talked to me about tech at all knows that I really, really like password managers. I think this is such an important security tool for everyone from the fairly computer literate to the extremely computer savvy. A password manager is essentially an application that allows you to store your credentials in a single location. I know you're already doing that in a Word document, cleverly entitled Important Stuff, right? Yeah, wrong. Do not store passwords in plain text format anywhere at any time. It doesn't matter if you haven't written the word password anywhere in the document. It doesn't matter if it's hidden away in one of your folders within folders or behind your monitor. Malware is getting really good at finding these types of documents. Security through obscurity is okay as part of a defense in depth strategy, but it should not be the thing that's standing between a stranger and all of your login accounts. A better place to store these passwords is inside of an encrypted database, either stored locally on your machine or provided as a cloud service by a reputable host. Preferably, access requires both a password and some kind of key file or a push notification to your phone. Some form of multi-factor authentication is best.
This is actually an example of a tool that uses multi-factor.
Sure, and encryption.
Yeah.
Cloud-based options will often be accessible via browser, but local options are frequently cross-platform, which means there's an app that works on your workstation, one that works on your mobile device, so you can have access to your passwords on the go. So why are password managers so great? They generally allow you to store a significant amount of additional information, not just your username and password, but a URL to the website that they're for, the ability to attach files that might be relevant to the login, some notes where you can add information that you gave the site, like security questions and answers or birth dates. You might think that it's silly to need to write down your security questions and birthdays. The point of those is that you can't forget them, right? But actually, with the amount of information that people are putting out there today on Facebook, it's not difficult to guess the answers to most of these questions that people put in. So it's actually often better for you to make something up, something that doesn't even necessarily follow from the question. You know, what was the model of your first car, like Aunt Selma's fruitcake? that kind of thing. It's fun. It's much harder for someone to guess, and that's where being able to store your answers takes on some real importance.
That's a great example.
Another nice thing is that you only have to remember one password, the one to get into the manager. Everything else is stored inside of the database. And that means that you can make that one password very strong, a whole phrase full of punctuation, because you just have to remember the one. You can also use password managers to generate passwords. You can tell the database what type of characters, what length, and it'll create a random strong password. So that means you don't have to sit there trying to garble up something that you're going to forget anyhow.
So that's nice for those sites where it needs to be like 8 characters, include these types of punctuation, uppercase, lowercase, and a number, and you're trying to sit there and figure out something you can remember that actually meets all this criteria rather than try one that says, no, you didn't do one thing, and sitting there for 15 minutes trying to come up with a good password.
Right, exactly. It also allows you to copy passwords into fields and then clears your clipboard automatically. So the password's no longer stored in memory to be pasted elsewhere, which is really nice. And some password managers will even allow you to autofill forms out of them into your browser. But perhaps most importantly, they make it easy to use different passwords for every account. Recycled passwords are a huge problem. We see compromises surrounding password reuse all the time in the security office. And this kind of makes sense, because if you have to remember every password that you have and you're logging into 20-some accounts, you're going to end up with 20 different versions of the same 2 passwords. But you don't want to have the password that you're using for email and banking be similar to the password that you're using for some throwaway account online. Because when that throwaway account server gets hacked and your email address and password are compromised, you don't have to give someone, you don't want to have given someone the necessary ingredients to access your important data. So by freeing you from having to remember your passwords, a password manager is helping you to avoid this problem. Great. And here are just a few examples of password managers so you can kind of visualize how this works. This one's a local application that you can install on your phone or your workstation, and you can organize your passwords into various folders. You can see some of the options here for what you can do with those passwords and some of the information that you're able to store. This one is a popular cloud-based version that does automatic field and form fills in your browser and allows you to organize your passwords as you like. The benefit of the cloud-based option, of course, is that it's available anytime, anywhere, from any workstation, so you don't have to have your password database saved on your phone with you all the time. So this presentation has given you 5 tools that can be used to help secure your data in your devices, and that become even more powerful when they're used together with one another. But I want to stress that tools are intended to supplement general security-minded behaviors and awareness and not replace them. The entire idea behind defense in depth, which I've kept mentioning throughout this presentation, is that the more layers of security you build in, the better. And that definitely starts with being a skeptic. Asking why something is free, why it needs such extensive permissions to your devices, where it came from, whether there's another way to achieve your goals without sacrificing your assurance of security. So the tools are there to assist you, because no one's perfect, and the better the tools get, the more the bad guys are going to rely on compromising you instead of compromising your security controls. So that awareness is really important. So keep checking in for security tech talks for tips and tricks. Check out my colleagues' security podcasts on the IT website for news and occasional security rants. And as GLaDOS would say, thank you for helping us help you help us all.
All right, great. Well, so we'll open it up if there are any additional questions that people want to ask. And I'll also give people a chance to download, when we're done here, a actual checklist that includes the tools that Mary talked about, along with some kind of good choices you can make to make sure you're really doing all you can to be secure. IT is doing their part with providing a lot of these services, but we need your help as well to make sure we all stay safe. So with that, I have a couple quick kind of feedback questions, and then I'll show you where you can download the information that we went through today. So our first question is, did you learn something new during today's event? And I love doing these, because especially the security ones, because there's always something new that I learned. This topic changes so much and so frequently and so many different ways that there's always something new to talk about. And I think the password manager is a big one, and a great example of kind of how all these things can work together to provide new security. It's great. Looks like pretty much everybody learned something new. That's always good to see. Oh, and Mary, maybe this is a question you can ask while we're wrapping things up too. Tracking cookies. It sounds kind of like a scary thing. What do they mean? Do those have any impact on security?
Yeah, it varies depending on what they're being used for. A lot of the time, they're really only concerned with how they're going to advertise to you. So in that sense, they're not quite as dangerous. But clearing out your cookie cache every once in a while is definitely something that I would suggest doing, just because none of anybody's business where you're going. So that's a setting that you can change in your browser. You can actually set it to just clear your history and your cookies and your cache and all that kind of stuff as soon as you close the browser, so you don't have to think about it when you log out every day.
Okay. And here's a great question. Are there any issues when we talked about the password management? Obviously, we'll create these great secure passwords, and it's a great way to keep all these passwords. Are there any issues with actually the password management tools being hacked, or how can you prevent that from happening and someone accessing all the information in there?
I've never heard of somebody actually getting into the encrypted database in that sense, but certainly if you have reused that password that you're using to get into your management tool somewhere else online, then it's not a secure password anymore, potentially. And so if somebody were able to get access to that password and to your machine, maybe they set up a keylogger on your device that's just catching every keystroke that you enter, and they have access to that database and they can log into it, yes, I mean, they would have access to all those things. And that's kind of the thing about storing all of your information in one place, is that that's one place that somebody has to get to, right?
So this is a perfect example of when not to write your password on a sticky note and leave it next to your computer.
Yes, exactly.
So really, really don't do that if you're using a password management tool.
Yeah, but again, I've never heard of that. That doesn't seem to be a widespread problem, and certainly a lot of these password databases are free to use, and many of them are open source. And so there are a lot of people out there looking at the code and making sure that the updates are happening and that they're the most secure that they can be.
So really, best practice: make sure you're using a reputable one.
Exactly.
That's probably the biggest part. Like you were saying with the URLs, don't go to my most secure password manager.com and think that that's necessarily going to be a reliable source. Look at the references that Mary gave. We can also, contact the support center if you have a question about one you're looking into, or your local IT support, and we can help you pick, one that's really going to help you out. So, and then our last question for feedback, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being very satisfied, how would you rate today's event? Like most people have answered this already. Great to see comments there. And I'll just mention too, any feedback for us, let us know. We make updates to these presentations based on your input. Topics, anything else we can cover, do let us know. We always like to make sure these are a useful use of your time. We know you spend a good amount of your day doing this, so we appreciate your attendance. All right, and I will show you where you can download what we went through today. So that is these files up here. So to download the PowerPoint that Mary went through, it's this Tech Talk Security 2016. It's a PDF. If you just click download files, it'll open in a new browser window for you, and you can download that. You can also download a security checklist that we've created, as I mentioned. That's very helpful and has several links to resources and services that we went through today as well. And this will also all be on the IT website later today or tomorrow, along with a link to the recording of today's event. Our next Tech Talk is in 2 weeks on Canvas and some new innovations in educational technology that we're doing at the university. So I just wanted to put a quick plug in for that. Thank you all for attending today, and thanks, Mary, for a great presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, have a great afternoon, everyone. Get out and enjoy the nice weather.